What's up, guys? This is Rey-Jay back with another video. And in this one, I want to break down what's happening with SPY, Tesla, and the broader markets. I'm going to break down why tomorrow is going to be very important for the markets as we're seeing an attempt to bounce. What you should be watching for as time goes on from the Fed. Just know that I am not a financial planner, so take nothing I'm saying as financial advice whatsoever. And also, if you guys can, please check out my Moomoo link that's down below, or use my QR code right here to sign up. If you sign up for Moomoo with the link down below and deposit $100, you're going to get $20 for free Nvidia stock. If you deposit $2,000, you're going to get $50 worth of Nvidia. Deposits $10,000 to get $300 worth of the stock, or deposits $50,000 to get $1,000 of free Nvidia. You're also going to qualify for a 3.6% APY base rate plus a 4.5% APY extra for 3 months, making it a total of an 8.1% APY in uninvested cash. The offer ends very soon, so please check out my link down below. There's only a couple of weeks left for this offer. Anyways, now let's talk about what's happening with the market. So, as far as SPY is going, as you guys can tell, we're in this downtrend, making lower highs and lower lows thus far. However, despite being in this overall downtrend, there are moments when the market likes to bounce off supports, and there could be temporary bounces that come despite what's going on. And I believe there's a very good chance the market may attempt to go a little bit higher if we hold above some key levels and if we see other things pan out. So I'm going to talk about the news, what to watch for as time goes on for this week. Then I'll break down exactly what I think the charts will end up doing. I do want to note that SPY has this resistance at our 20 EMA. This is currently at 662.91. If we break this, I would not rule out the possibility of very close to 666 and eventually this upper trend line. And I do think we could try to go higher if we hold above some key levels. And simultaneously, the QQQ is trying to bounce right here. We're going to likely try to go higher, or at least attempt to do so, for that 594 resistance, which if this breaks, I'm looking for 597.8 and eventually 603 for a temporary bounce. Now, it is going to be a very short week with Thanksgiving for the week. And also, the market's going to be closing early on Friday, as it's going to be the day after Thanksgiving. So, we have a very short trading week. So, I'll break down exactly how this is going to pan out. To start things off, tomorrow is going to be Monday, November 24th, 2025. At 10:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, we have the Dallas Fed Manufacturing Index report. This could cause some volatility, so watch for that. Then at 11:30 a.m., we have the 3 and 6 month bill auctions. And that's pretty much it. There's not really a whole lot of significant data coming out for Monday. But this could cause a little bit of volatility around 10:30 a.m. because of these manufacturing numbers. Now, on Tuesday, we have the ADP employment change that's coming out. This is very important. This may cause some volatility as we're getting some more jobs numbers. And the PPI data will let us know how inflation is looking. That could also cause some volatility on Tuesday. And besides that, we do have some more manufacturing numbers later on for the week. For Wednesday, we have some potential jobs numbers and the possibility of GDP numbers from what I'm reading. That could also cause more volatility. And then there's not going to be any data for Thursday as it's going to be Thanksgiving. And there's not really much for Friday as it's going to be just half a day of trading. So the three main days are Monday through Wednesday. And so far, at least for Monday, we're watching to see if the market responds to this data that's coming out. Now, one thing that's a little concerning for the Fed is the fact that lots of the jobs numbers are not going to be coming out. For the month of October, for instance, the data is not actually coming out entirely. And then simultaneously, we also have the November numbers. Those are going to be delayed. So the November jobs report is going to be coming out on December 16th. And CPI is also going to be coming out around, I believe, December 18th. So a lot of data is going to be coming out after FOMC, which is why there's lots of uncertainty for the Fed about what's about to happen, right? Are we about to get some kind of cut? Are we not? The odds of us getting a cut started to go up a little bit to 69.4% as the market's trying to bounce. And that's because of what we heard from the Fed so far. We had John Williams, who came out and he was talking about how he thinks there's a good chance that, despite all the uncertainty, he is favoring a December rate cut because he thinks that it's going to benefit borrowing costs and also because of the current restrictive policy that is due for some kind of cuts. He mentioned that. He also talked about how there's still progress on inflation. Although it has stalled temporarily, he still thinks that the Fed is going to do a good job at getting to their 2% target, and he remains optimistic. So he thinks there's a good chance we get a cut despite all the uncertainty right now. And that's part of why the market started to bounce on Friday. Now, another thing to remember is that What's driving the market is fear. We're at extreme fear right now. That's making up the majority of sentiments. Momentum is also at extreme fear. We're going to see how this ends up going. And finally, the put to call option ratio is, skyrocketing to the upside. This is very important because that tells us that, we're continuing to see lots of puts being bought. And right now, fear is continuing to drive our option positions. So that typically favors that there's going to be some kind of like temporary bottom and a small bounce coming. When you see this much fear driving sentiment, that's what I'm going to be looking for. And last but not least, for earnings, there's not really much coming out for the week. It's very, very quiet. On Tuesday, we have lots of volatility coming to Chinese stocks such as Alibaba and NEO. And then we just have like Kohl's and Best Buy, not really a whole lot coming out. Wednesday is going to be a little bit more quiet. Not really much comes out for Wednesday. There's no data for Thursday. And then Friday also is very, very quiet. So we'll see how it goes. So with that being said, I just wanted to mention that technically we are on a downtrend as SPY is continually making lower highs and lower lows. But we dropped really hard to this 650 area. I mentioned in my previous videos that this is essentially our 0.786 fib level. So if I take out a Fibonacci retracement just like this, right, and you draw it from the low we saw in October and go to the all-time high, we basically bounced very, very close to that 0.786 fib level, almost making equal lows right over here. And then simultaneously, off getting a bounce here, we also dropped about, I think, like almost 5%. We are down to like 4.5% right now, and we were basically down even more. At least for now, we're down about 5.5% or so. And now we're trying to bounce here. So I do think that we're going to be attempting to establish a temporary bottom here. And I think that because of the slight bullish divergence that we're trying to form, I would not be surprised if SPY tries to go a little bit higher to start off the week. And then we're going to see if we reject off this resistance again. That is my notion, at least right now. So in case I am wrong, and in case we do turn really bearish if we get a really bad piece of news, you want to see SPY fail at 650. If 650 fails us, I'm looking for 646 and then 642 as our targets. But I don't really favor that we're gonna lose like 650 that easily. I think that we might see a little consolidation tomorrow, and then there's going to be an attempt to bounce to try to get back up towards this upper trend line. Now, we also have resistance around 662 and then 665. So I'll be watching those levels. I think the odds favor that tomorrow we see a little consolidation, then we attempt to go higher since the 4 hour is looking more bullish. And because we're attempting to bounce off this lower trend line, typically we touch the lower trend line, then we bounce to the upper trend line. We come down a little bit, then we come back up to the upper trend line. We come down, and we should be coming back up towards this upper trend line. So I favor that we're going to be pushing to the mid 660s. We kind of like consolidate towards 658s tomorrow, maybe go a little lower. Then we're looking for a bounce back up to 666 to 668. And then we're going to see if we reject again and if we continue to fall or not. If we could hold above 668, though, there is a chance we try to go even higher. And we could be looking for an attempt to get back up towards these local highs in our imbalance over here around the 680 area. However, we're not going to be getting too ahead of ourselves. I just favor a consolidation tomorrow and then an attempts to get back up to 666 to 668 as the most likely possibility. I will turn more bearish in case we fail at 650, but I don't really favor that. I think the odds favor us consolidating, then bouncing towards our EMAs. On the QQQ, the same thing is going on. There's a slight divergence, and also note that we basically are testing the same levels we saw in October, right? This is very close to like 582-ish. Notice that this is like a double bottom on the QQQ, and we're at some major support. So to be bearish, if you want to be a bear, if you want to see the market dump, you need to see us fail at 582. If 582 fails on the QQQ and we can't hold it for 4 hours, I anticipate we could be dipping to 576, but I don't think that's very likely. If you're a bullish person and you think the market's going to rally, you want to see us break 597.82. If that breaks, I would not rule out the possibility of us going back up to 603. I believe the most likely possibility is that when you look at the daily time frame on the triple Q, the daily has potential with this wick forming. Same thing with the SPY chart. We basically have potential to go a little bit higher looking at the dailies. And then on the 4 hour, which is very key for looking at directions, it looks like we want to bounce. We want to go a little bit higher judging by this 4 hour time frame. There's a slight divergence. I think there's a slight divergence forming. And I think that what's going to likely happen is that so long as we could hold like 585, we could consolidate between 585 and 590 for some time. But then we're looking for an attempt to push for 597.8 and eventually the very low 600s. I think we temporarily bounce on the QQQ. Just like SPY, we are on a downtrend. Lower highs, lower lows, lower highs, lower lows is what we're making. So even if we do bounce towards the low 600s, we could still reject again. I'm not saying this is the overall reversal, but I think that we're going to temporarily bounce for 597 to 600, and then we'll see if we test this upper trend line. I think the QQQ goes for a bounce temporarily to start off the week, and then we'll see how it goes. Tomorrow morning, look for consolidation down here between 585 and 590. Then we're looking for a bounce back up towards 597.8 in the low 600s. Now, the Russell 2000 is looking decent. This also had a slight bullish divergence. It's trying to bounce right here after so much downside. One concern about this is that on the daily time frame, I noticed that this has a gap down here to fill. There's a gap down here around 225. So there is risk of downside that still exists on the IWM's overall setup, right? There's still that downside trend, the downside move that's still there, but we're not ready to dump straight down. I think we bounce a little bit first before we may see more downside later. So follow the trend in front of you and look at the 4 hour. For now, we're going to see a temporary bounce, most likely. If you want to be bearish, first you want to see us lose like 230 to come back down to fill the gap towards 225. But I don't really favor that. I think the odds favor us consolidating, then pushing for closer to 240. Hopefully, we could try to break and hold above 236. If 236 holds, I'm looking for 240. That's going to be our 200 EMA. And if that breaks, this imbalance right here is going to get tested. So I favor a temporary bounce on the IWM. As long as we don't lose 230, we're looking more bullish, favoring 240 for tomorrow or by Tuesday. ES is looking decent right now. So on ES, what you'll see is that we've been on this big downtrend and then we like to bounce. We've also been on a downtrend on ES, but what typically happens is you have this trend line acting as support. So typically you touch this support, you bounce, touch support, you bounce up to the upper trend line. Touch support, we could consolidate, but then I'm going to be looking for an attempt to rebound towards the upper trend line for a move just like that on ES. Now, if you're bearish, you want to see us fill at 65.80, very close to that support. If we lose 65.80, we could be dipping more, but as long as this holds, I'm looking for a small dip tomorrow, then a consolidation and a bounce back up towards 6,700 for an attempt to get back up to this upper trend line. I think that after what Williams from the Fed has said, and because we've already dropped so much, we're due for a small bounce. I would not be surprised if we consolidate tomorrow, then attempt to get back up to 6,700. On NQ or the NASDAQ, we're seeing the same thing. Now, if we lose 24,000, that's going to be more bearish, but as long as we can make a higher low, we could attempt to rebound for 24,570. If that breaks, we're looking for 24,894 for a temporary bounce. So I still favor that heading into tomorrow looking at the current setups. Bitcoin is bouncing as I speak. That's another good sign for the markets, but this support becoming resistance around 88,500 is going to be a little bit tough to break. I do think we push to test that. If we break that, I would not rule out 92,000, but I think we temporarily push on Bitcoin, and that could be bullish for the markets temporarily. Tesla's on a downtrend, lower highs, lower lows, lower highs, and lower lows. If we're bearish, okay, we could be looking for 382 to fail us, but if we're bullish, you want to see us break past 398. Now, I do think Tesla could still come down to fill its gap below. There's a gap to fill at 368, and it's possible it dips a little bit. But I'm going to be looking to see if Tesla could bounce a bit to retest this upper trend line in the low 400s for a temporary move higher. And then we're going to see if Tesla kind of rejects again, kind of like this. So I'm looking for a move like this on Tesla, as it's been kind of like range bound for the last couple of days. So Tesla could dip a bit. It could retest 390 or below, then bounce back up to the low 400s, then could reject again as we're still trading sideways. On Nvidia, we're technically on a downtrend. However, there are wicks forming here, and I would not be surprised if Nvidia tries to get back up to 184. I think it temporarily bounces for 184 to 186, and then we're going to see if it turns back down again as we're technically on a downtrend. So look for a small bounce. Apple could also help the markets pump more because it is very impactful for the S&P 500. We're in a range right here, but the overall flow in Apple could have a ripple effect. As we hold above 269, we're going to be favoring 272.5 on Apple or above, so we favor upside. Netflix is on a big downtrend. However, what I do like about Netflix is that We're testing very close to this resistance becoming support near 104, and we also have support closer to about 100. So I would not be surprised if Netflix kind of like dips a bit. We're near that key support between 100 and 102. And then we could be looking for a rebound off of that, back up towards 106 and then 108. So I do see some downside risk before it tries to bounce. MSTR is consolidating here. If we form a bottom at 166 and we hold this, we could bounce for 188. So watch that very closely. Celsius has a double bottom. As long as this holds, we could be looking for an attempt for 40. Supermicro also is trying to bounce back up towards 33.92. So we'll see if this holds. On Palantir, we're looking a bit more bullish. We have a slight divergence. As long as we don't end up losing 150, we could be looking for a bounce towards 160. Rivian has resistance around 15.01 and support at 14.3. Hopefully, we could break this resistance and push for 15.5. So we'll see if that ends up being the case for a temporary bounce. SoFi is favoring 26.3, then 27.5 as our resistances. Looking at AMD, now if we lose support over here around 198, it's going to be a bad sign, and this could continue to dump. But as long as we can hold close to 200, I'm going to be favoring a bounce back up towards this 216 area. On ARM, we're forming a nice temporary bottom around 127 before this tries to bounce back up to 136.6. PayPal, as long as we're above 60.8, we're going to be favoring a pushback up towards 62.25. Coinbase could also be looking for a pushback up towards 251, and we'll see how it goes. On Amazon, we're looking for an attempt for 225 as a resistance alongside 227. As long as we're above 597, we're looking for an attempt to bounce back up to 604. And then Google is going to be favoring some upside as it's making higher highs and higher lows, favoring a push back up towards that 306 area. Microsoft's been on a downtrend. I want to see if we can hold above 470. If that holds, we're looking for a bounce back up towards that 480 area. And then Oracle could be looking for a bounce. So long as we don't end up losing 198, we could be looking for a bounce to about 206. Last but not least, we also have DJT, which is trying to rebound right here. We're consolidating. We could be looking for an attempt for 10.7. The VIX is rejecting. If it does not hold 23.29, I'm looking for 21.4. As this dips, it could be another potential area where this bounces from. But for now, the VIX looks to me like it's rejecting off this trend line. This is going to be the main resistance, and our main support is going to be down here, which makes me suspect that we're in a channel on the VIX, and this might be coming to the lower trend line as the market attempts to bounce. The dollar has been on an uptrend, but there's like a double top forming around the 100.3 area. We could retest 100.05. If that fails, we're looking for 99.8. And then we also have crude, which has been on a downtrend, and we're going to see if we bounce or not. So that being said, I think that the odds favor the market trying to go higher. We may consolidate tomorrow in the daytime, but then as time goes on, I'm going to be looking for a temporary bounce, and we could attempt to get back up to this upper trend line. As long as we could hold this support, I would not rule out the mid 660s on SPY and the QQQ consolidating, then trying to go for 597 to 600 as the most likely possibilities for tomorrow. I am not saying that this is a massive bounce. This could just be a temporary bounce for the markets. Then we'll have to see how we end up reacting to the next resistance as we take this one step at a time. But looking at the divergences and the fact that so far we're getting some optimism from the Fed, as we have Williams from the Fed talking about the possibility of a cut, I think this is helping the markets to some extent, and this could help us bounce a little bit just for the time being. Then we'll see what happens with our next pieces of data coming out when it comes to employment and PPI on Tuesday. For now, look for consolidation and a bounce for tomorrow is the most likely possibility. Watch your levels just to be safe, because we can't always predict everything perfectly, as unexpected pieces of news can still come out, But I favor a bounce, and I think the most likely possibility is the market goes for a consolidation, then bounce for tomorrow, and then we'll see how we end up reacting. Thank you for listening, guys. Enjoy the rest of your guys' Sundays, and I'll be back very, very soon tomorrow before the market opens for another update. Until then, I wish you all the best, and peace out.